Max Verstappen is back on the top step of the podium, ending Oscar Piastri's 3-race win streak. What went into another brilliant win by the Dutchman, and one that seemed very unrealistic coming out of Friday. McLaren dropped the ball again with strategy, but did it really make a difference? Ferrari outperforming their expectations, Mercedes underperforming, and a few other thoughts on the rest of the grid as we come out of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. All coming up next on the Chicanery Podcast. I want to start today's episode at the top with Max Verstappen. His 65th win of his career and first win as a father. This was a dominant win for Max from start to finish. It of course all started with his lap 1 move on Oscar Piastri, and Max didn't even have that great of a start off the line. It was just a gutsy move, and probably one of the best lap 1, turn 1, or in this case turn 2 overtakes we've ever seen. Max really set himself up for this move with his positioning going down the front straight though. He loses out to Oscar initially, and he has George Russell creeping up alongside him to his left, but Max put himself in a great position to get the outside line around Oscar, but he also closed off Lando from making a move on the outside of him too. But the move Max ended up making, going around the outside of Piastri, it's the type of move that only the all-time great drivers can make. It was a little reminiscent of the move Oscar made on Lando last year in Monza, so a little ironic there, but both drivers said it. It all came down to Piastri braking too early and Max braking late enough to make the move stick. But that move to get ahead really put Max in a position to control the race, and he did from that point on. Which was pretty unexpected because after Max gets ahead, I think we're all thinking, okay, well, give it a few laps, Oscar will get back ahead, especially once DRS kicks in. But the more the race went on, the more you realized, okay, Red Bull has the strongest car on track today. Max's lead over Oscar during that first stint just kept growing and growing bit by bit, and I'm sure Oscar was hurt by Max's dirty air to some extent, but later in the race when Max and Lando were both in clean air, the Red Bull still looked like the fastest car, or at the very least as fast as the McLarens, even if Oscar stayed ahead of Max after turn 1. I don't know if he would have been able to keep Max behind. It looked like a little luck played into the result with Max and the virtual safety car, but at the end of the day, it probably didn't matter. If the VSC never came out, Max still would have had enough of a gap to box and come out in first. And the only way it backfires on Red Bull is if Max came in a lap too early like Lando did, and then Lando stays out and gets the VSC advantage. But that was never in the cards for Red Bull. With Max being so far ahead and Oscar getting caught up in traffic, they were in an ideal position to stay out the longest and just react to everyone behind them. On the flip side too, Max gained an extra 10 seconds from the VSC, but that ended up being negated by the safety car later in the race. So for Max, that VSC was pretty much a wash. A lot of credit for this win, though, goes to Max and his team. It was a flawless, mistake-free race by Max. But not only was it a mistake-free race, his first lap at the start of the race and his first lap after the safety car were crucial. At the end of lap 2, when Oscar would have had his first chance at being within DRS range of Max, Max was already 1.4 seconds ahead. And Max never let Piastri get within DRS range after that. Likewise, Max pulled out the same gap over Piastri at the end of the first lap after the safety car, before DRS was even activated. So the two moments when Max was probably the most vulnerable, he put in phenomenal laps and didn't give Piastri or anyone else a chance at overtaking him. For the Red Bull team, though, and specifically Max's side of the garage, what a job done by them from Friday to Saturday. We've seen them pull this off so many times in the past, and this weekend was just another example. They show up, they have a disappointing Friday, and the car looks like it doesn't have a shot at competing for a race win. They tweak the car and make setup changes overnight, and then all of a sudden on Saturday, they're back at the top fighting for pole. But the difference this weekend was the Saturday success carried over to Sunday, and that credit goes to the upgrades Red Bull brought this weekend. This was a track that suited their car better than others with the high-speed corners, but the tire deg and race pace issues were completely gone today. Before this weekend, I think most people doubted Max as a legitimate threat to win the Drivers' Championship this year. We knew he was the best driver on the grid. We knew he was one of the greatest drivers of all time and capable of winning races when he shouldn't. but the Red Bull car had been struggling since last year, and it looked like those struggles would be too great for even Max to overcome. But after this race, there isn't a doubt that Max is right there in the championship fight with the two McLaren drivers. Next week we have Monaco. It should be a track where Red Bull isn't as strong with all of the low speed corners, but as we know, this race usually comes down to qualifying. And we know how good Max is at putting together the perfect lap in qualifying. And after that, we're off to Spain, another circuit with a lot of high speed corners, but also the race where the new Flexi-Wing technical directives start, which can end up being a complete reset. And there's a lot of speculation that these new directives will hurt McLaren more than most, but especially more than Red Bull. We still have 17 more races to go. This thing is far from over. But this championship fight is legitimately a three-way battle now. A tough Sunday for Oscar Piastri, full of mistakes for himself and the team. Really out of the ordinary for a driver who rarely makes mistakes. It started with the start of the race and Oscar losing out to Max going into turn 2. Oscar admitted after the race that Max did take him by surprise, but it also looked like Oscar was a little preoccupied with George behind him. But Max getting past Oscar put Oscar into Max's dirty air and put him at a huge disadvantage with his tires. I don't think this was just on the lap 1 move though. We saw some of Oscar's tire management demons come back to life this race, and he was really struggling at the end of the first stint. It's hard to say if it was Oscar burning through his tires too quickly or if it was the McLaren pit wall overreacting to George Russell pitting early. I personally think it was a little bit of both. But with the hindsight we have after the race, it's clear McLaren brought Oscar in way too early for that first pit stop. And that decision really ended up throwing off his strategy for the rest of the race. So let's say Oscar stays out instead of pitting on lap 14 and instead pits somewhere around lap 25. He probably doesn't have enough to stay out long enough to get the benefit of the VSC, but he at least avoids this really weird pit strategy call from McLaren. So the VSC comes out on lap 30. At this point, Oscar's on hard tires that are 16 laps old. Pretty much everyone around him comes into pit on lap 30 under the VSC, but McLaren keeps Oscar out, but then brings him into the pits a lap later with the race still under VSC. But Oscar comes out of the pits in 4th as the VSC is ending, and he's almost 10 seconds behind Alex Albon in 3rd, and almost 20 seconds behind Lando in 2nd. So then Oscar spends the next 10 laps trying to catch Albon and burning up his tires, and you could see his pace fall off once he got past Albon. But then we have Kimi Antonelli retire on lap 46, which brings out a safety car, and all of the top runners, other than Leclerc, come in for new tires, except Oscar, because McLaren's worried about losing too many positions. Just a series of errors from the team that just kept building off of each other. But if Oscar stayed out long enough on that first stint, he probably at least stays ahead of Lando, and probably pits before Lando before the VSC comes out, and then he comes out of the VSC period in P2 with fresh tires. But then when the safety car comes 15 laps later, Oscar's still in P2 and able to pit again for another set of new tires, which could have given him a shot at the win, or at least staying in 2nd. McLaren told us they learned from last year's mistakes. They told us stuff like this wouldn't happen again, but here we are, yet again, coming out of a race, scratching our heads at the McLaren pit wall because it looks like they were in over their heads making strategy calls in the crucial moments of a race. It was a little bit of a different story for Oscar's teammate Lando Norris, though. P2 was probably the best he could have done today. Continuing with McLaren pit wall mistakes, I want to talk about the final 10 laps and McLaren's decision to let the two drivers race instead of giving team orders to Oscar to let Lando by so he could have a shot at Max. So the safety car ends on lap 54. We have Max in 1st on new tires, Oscar in 2nd on old tires, and Lando in 3rd on new tires. It was obvious to everyone that it was only a matter of time before Lando got past Oscar. And it was obvious Lando was the only McLaren driver who had an actual shot of getting past Max for the race win. Just make the call. Give yourself a shot. But instead, it takes Lando 3 laps to get past Oscar, and once he does, Max is almost 5 seconds up the road. The move it didn't make sense to me. I don't know if there's a clause in Piastri's contract, if it's Mark Webber and just putting the fear of God into this team, or if the team feels like they owe Oscar for making him take a back seat last year for Lando, but it feels like they're so afraid to go against Oscar at this point. Fortunately, for the sake of the argument, I don't think the decision really mattered too much at the end of the day. Max was just so fast, and I don't think Lando would have had enough to catch him even if team orders were given. But it's still a what if, and you feel like McLaren at least gave up a chance to win this race today. Outside of the strategy calls, I think this was a big race for Lando's confidence and could give him some momentum moving forward. He, of course, cut down on Oscar's championship lead by 3 points, but it was the overtakes by Lando that we don't see from him too often. Two wheel to wheel battles, one with George Russell at the beginning of the race and the other with Oscar at the end of the race. They were both incredible moves. And granted, Lando had a tire advantage over Oscar for that last overtake, but for Lando mentally, he can walk away from today and say, all right, my teammates had the upper hand lately, and he's gotten me a few times, but I'm capable of getting him back. I can go wheel to wheel with him if it comes to it, and I can come out on top. I didn't expect it going into the race, but today was actually a pretty good day for Ferrari. A very disappointing qualifying for them, with both drivers missing out on Q3. And with this track and how hard it's been to pass historically, it looked like it was going to be a long Sunday for Ferrari. But to come away with P4 and P6 is better than they or anyone else expected. For Lewis, strategy played a big role in this result. We all know Lewis. He loves opting for the alternate strategy, and usually it comes back to bite him. But not today. He starts on the hard tires when most of the other drivers start on the mediums, and because of that, he had perfect timing later in the race with the VSC and safety car. It was a little harder for his teammate Charles Leclerc, though. Like Piastri, he also came in way too early to get off the medium tires, and then makes a second stop under the VSC, which ended up hurting him overall. Because when the safety car came out at the end of the race, he couldn't box because they only had soft tires left, and those wouldn't have made it to the end. But the Ferraris had a really strong pace today, and even with that strategy mistake, Leclerc was still able to recover. Both of these drivers were able to make a number of overtakes today and work their way up the order. That safety car did help make this look a little better than it actually was, though. Without it, I think we probably still see a P4, P6, maybe a P5, P6 finish, with Albon maybe holding on to that gap that he had. But they also probably finished 45 seconds off the lead instead of 14 seconds off the lead, which would not have been pretty. There's still some work to do at Ferrari, and that starts with qualifying. They won't be competing for wins, but they have some pace in that car, but they need to give themselves a better shot starting higher up the order. A surprisingly pretty bad day for Mercedes, on the other hand. They just didn't have the speed today, and both cars seemed to run into mechanical problems. George, after the race, said he was experiencing problems with the car right away on his warm-up lap to the grid, and also complained that something was broken with the rear of his car that was causing it to move around on the straights. But overall, he attributed most of the issues to the warmer temperatures and the car overheating and their tire management issues. Not good news for Mercedes as we're heading into the summer months, and you have to think their time is limited trying to fix this issue before they turn their attention to next year's car. A really tough break for Kimi Antonelli, though, with a DNF in his first home race. He didn't help his cause with Saturday's qualifying, which put him further down the order than he'd like during most of the race, but to not even finish the race makes it sting even more. Just a tough day overall for Mercedes. I don't think they had expectations of winning the race. I don't think they're too disappointed at finishing behind Max. But finishing behind the Ferraris with how the season has gone so far is definitely a step back for the team. Williams with a pretty good Sunday. Alex Albon finishes P5, Carlos Sainz finishes P8. They just looked really fast today. And it's not just track specific. Their success is coming at a number of different tracks, which is what you want to see when you're a team trying to work your way up to the top. It was a brief moment, but there was a moment where I thought, wait a minute, does Alex Albon actually have a shot of getting onto the podium? Obviously he didn't, but it wasn't that far away, which would have sounded impossible coming into this season for this team. It's getting really fun to watch the growth of Williams. This car's improving, the drivers are improving, and this is a team that expects to fight consistently for points now. I do still have some doubts that they'll be able to keep this going the whole season since they've already turned their development focus to 2026, but Williams is capitalizing on the moment for now. A tough Sunday for Aston Martin and Alpine. Both came into the race with high hopes based on their qualifying, but those hopes were quickly put to bed once the race got going. They were just slow today, and they had a number of cars that were behind them because of poor qualifying results that were able to catch up and get around them during the race. Pierre Gasly also had that moment fighting Leclerc on lap 3 where he went off track and lost 5 positions, and he was on his back foot from that point on. For Aston Martin, strategy did play a role in their tough Sunday too. Both drivers came in early to get off the medium tires. Alonso came in on lap 13, Stroll came in on lap 15. When the VSC came on lap 30, they both stayed out while everyone else came in for fresh tires. And with that tire deficit, they just fell down the order over the next 15 laps until the safety car came out. A tough break for both teams, though, who need to secure all the points they can get, and they had the opportunities to do that today. I want to finish up with some quick thoughts on the other Red Bull drivers. A really strong performance from Isaac Hadjar finishing P9. He's looking so good lately. He's consistently making it into Q3. He's consistently fighting for points. And Red Bull has to be happy that he's showing this form so early in his career. For Yuki, he has to be happy with a P10 finish after starting from the pit lane too. He still needs to show more, and he needs to avoid those qualifying mistakes that put him too far behind to start the race. And I would be a little bit concerned for Yuki. He's doing much better than Liam Lawson was in the second Red Bull seat, so he has that going for him. But with Hadjar looking as strong as he has, you have to wonder a little bit how Red Bull is viewing these two drivers in comparison. We didn't see much from him during the race, but another not so great finish from Liam Lawson. He finishes P14, and he was also hurt by some strategy calls. He came in for the first time on lap 11 and then again under the VSC on lap 30, but not during the safety car, which put him at a disadvantage at the end of the race. It's a tough look for Liam, though, with Hadjar looking so strong in the same car. He's consistently getting beaten by his rookie teammate, and Red Bull has another young driver waiting in Arvid Lindblad, who they are very high on. I think Liam stays here the rest of the year. I don't think that's at risk at all. But if he can't get close to Isaac Hadjar's results, this team won't hesitate to consider making another switch. All right, that'll do it on today's recap of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. We will, of course, be back next week for the crown jewel of the Formula One calendar as we are off to Monaco. Always an exciting, well, not the most exciting race, but always an eventful race and a cool one to watch on TV. But we might get some excitement this year because we have a mandatory two-stop race, so it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. I will, of course, be back with a preview episode later in the week, followed by another recap episode following Sunday's race. Thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening. Till next time.